Lesson 121, using proportions. For today's lesson, you are going to come across word problems, and you are going to need to use proportions to solve these word problems. So in this video, I'll be going over a couple of examples so that you know exactly what you need to do and how you need to do it. So I have here a word problem, and the problem is, if Johnny is 5 feet tall and casts a shadow of 8 feet, how tall is a tree that casts a 24-foot shadow? Set up a proportion to solve. So I have a picture for you here. We have Johnny and his shadow. Now, assuming that it is sunny outside, the shadows cast by people or objects are proportionate to their height. So if Johnny knows that he's 5 feet tall and he has a shadow of 8 feet, we can actually use that information to figure out an unknown height of an object, assuming you know the length of the shadow. And here's how it works. You set up a proportion. So let's start with Johnny's ratio. Johnny is 5 feet tall, and he casts a shadow of 8 feet. The tree, we don't know how tall the tree is. X is our missing number. We don't know the height of the tree, but we do know that the shadow is 24 feet tall. So what I've done here is I've set up a proportion, just like the ones that you looked at in the last lesson, where you had 3 of the numbers filled in and you were missing 1 and had to find the missing number. Now, an important thing to note about how I set this up, especially because our units are both in feet, I made sure that the shadow lengths matched up at the bottom. The bottom of my ratios were the shadow lengths, and then the top was the height of the person or object. Okay, so that's going to be important for you when you're setting up these proportions, making sure that you can think about them as denominators. Your denominators match. All right, so for this one, it's a relatively simple one. You can use the equivalent fraction method. Think to yourself, what times 8 gets me 24? That would be multiplied by 3. So all you have to do is multiply Johnny's height by 3, and then you find, running out of space, I'll put it up here, that x equals 15 feet. So the tree is 15 feet tall. All right, so setting up a proportion and then solving it. Let's do one more example. It's maybe a little bit more complicated. So I have in the purple here, Mary's car traveled 250 miles on 10 gallons of gas. So I'm going to start out by setting up a ratio. So she took 10 gallons of gas to travel 250 miles. How many gallons of gas will she need to travel 625 miles? So let's set up a proportion, making sure that I'm matching up the units. I have miles and miles matching up. And the missing number is the number of gallons. So that's what we're going to have to figure out. Now for this one, it's not so easy because you can't just take 250, multiply it by a nice easy number to get to 625. So we have to use what we know about cross products and use that strategy. So remember cross products, 10 times 625 should equal the same thing as 250 times x. So if we do 10 times 625, we end up with 6,250. So we know that 250 times something should equal the same thing, 6,250. So just like you did in the last lesson, in order to find that missing number, you simply divide 6,250 divided by 250. So 250 has to go into 625 and it goes twice. So we get 500. We subtract. We get 125. Don't forget to bring down the 0. 250 goes into 1,250 5 times and it goes nice and evenly. So we end up with a remainder of 0, which means she's going to need 25 gallons of gas to travel 625 miles. All right. So for your work in your book and for your answers, you should have two things. You should have a proportion set up, remembering to use your units and match up those units. And then you should also, after you have calculated it, come to a final answer. So make sure that you're practicing setting up the proportion and you are giving a final answer for each of these. So really we're combining things that we've learned before. Now you just have to take some words and make them into a proportion and then solve it.